Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now here's your host, who believes the best game day is one with perfect streaming bandwidth, Sean Callanan.
I'm Sean Callanan, and welcome to episode 403 of Sports Geek. This week I catch up with Damani Leech. He's the president of the Denver Broncos in the NFL. Welcome back. Welcome back to the podcast in 2025, podcasting year 12. I'm excited for the year ahead. I hope you are too. Welcome to my new voiceover artist, Parker. As you can imagine, I've been playing around with the AI space, especially around voice, using my own voice in Sports Geek Rapid Rundown, using 11 Labs. So I thought we'd freshen up our voiceovers with using 11 Labs and try a few different things. So I agree with Parker. I do hope I get perfect game day bandwidth, especially when I'm in New Orleans for Super Bowl 59. You might be listening to Sports Geek for the first time, or you might be listening since episode 1. I really do appreciate it. You can find all episodes at sportsgeekhq.com, or you can listen to them on your favorite podcast platform. Mine remains Pocket Casts. As always, if you could leave us a review on the platform, you can now leave reviews on Pocket Casts. You can do so, leave reviews, star ratings on Apple or on Spotify. Really do appreciate them. And don't forget, we are now sharing all of the interviews on our Sports Geek YouTube channel. So all interviews, as the episode drops, will be also available on the YouTube channel. So if you could subscribe to Sports Geek on YouTube, I'd really appreciate it. It's been good to see a few bump in numbers and a bump in viewership as we start putting some of the content on YouTube. Please check it out. I caught up with Damani in December as the NFL season was coming to a close while the Broncos were fighting for a playoff spot. Really happy to see them reach the playoff spot, and I hope you enjoy my chat with Damani Leech. Very happy to welcome Damani Leech. He's the president of the Denver Broncos Football Club. Damani, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Not a problem at all. I always want to start my interviews with trying to get people's sports business origin story. What about yourself? How did you find yourself in the world of sports?
Yeah, for me, this started really in college. So I was a football student athlete. I played football at Princeton University. The first couple summers I was enrolled, I did internships in banking. And, you know, Ivy League athletes, so there's a well-worn pathway to finance. And I was doing that in the first couple summers, and I just didn't enjoy it. I did not love the work. I didn't understand how much money you could make doing it, but I just didn't really enjoy it, going to work every day. And my parents said, look, you're gonna need to find a job that you enjoy getting up every day and doing. And I was 19 years old at the time. And when you're 19, for me, that meant sports. I was like, man, I really love sports. And they said, well, you need to find out if you can get a job doing that. And so this was, mid 90s, there was no internet to just Google things. And so I went to our head coach, who sent me to the athletic director, and he opened up his Rolodex, and he found, 4 or 5 Princeton alums who were working in sports. And he said, call them and find out what they do. And that's what I did. And that was just enough for the light bulb to go on, to see that there could be a career in sports that wasn't, coaching or officiating. And so everybody had the same answer to the question of what's the first step, which is you need to start as an intern. And so I applied for every internship under the sun that I could get information about, and was fortunate to get one at the PGA Tour, and that got me started.
And so you got that internship, and then you found yourself at the NCAA. What was some of a long career at the NCAA? What were some of your key things you learned working at NCAA?
Yeah. So real quick internship at the PGA Tour. Golf clearly was not a requirement for the job, and then went to the NCAA. I did my first 4 years in rules compliance, which was a lot of sort of governance, how sort of college sports works, and getting sharper on that, interpretations, things like that. So I did that, and then I moved into what we call sort of the shinier side of the coin, which was our championships group, postseason football, championships and events. And I spent the better part of, over 10 years doing that, and loved it. And that was, a lot of sort of what fans see, the consumer side of sports, events, television, tickets, sponsorships, all those things. And did that for a while and really loved it. And at the time, that was all I was focused on. But was fortunate then to get a call from the NFL. I was doing a lot of things in football, and they were trying to grow, and particularly on the football operations side. And so my first role at the league office was vice president of football development, and it was basically, look at the game of football, think 10, 20 years down the road. Where do you think the game is going? How do we get there? And so it was a lot of data, sort of the future of fill in the blank, future of equipment, future playing rules, future player, which got me more involved in international, and got me really excited about that possibility. And there was this really small guy named Jordan Mailata who we got introduced to as we were developing this international player pathway program. And again, the light bulb went on of like, you know what? There are a limited number of people walking the planet that have a size, weight, speed, flexibility ratio to play this game. And they're not all born in the United States, which is sort of a humbling thing to think about when you're at the NFL, but it was true. And so that really got me excited about international and the possible growth of the sport, of the business, and of the game and fandom and all those things. And so moved into the role of COO of international for the last 4 years I was there.
So that's how we first crossed paths, you in that international role. It must have been exciting because, the NFL is massive. It stops everything on a Sunday in the US, but then to be looking outside the US and looking at new markets and effectively go back to the beginning. What were some of those initial, discussions? One, going into a new market, identifying a new market. Like it would have been a little bit foreign for everyone in the NFL because you've got such a large established US fan base. Was there a little bit of rethinking and relearning all of those skills from a fan growth point of view?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think one, it was a real challenge, at 345 Park Avenue, trying to get people to understand that the NFL wasn't the number one sport in every single country around the world. And like, why can't you just go into those markets and have a bunch of success? But there were some people, fortunately, the commissioner is one of them, who spent a lot of time working international. Don Garber, who's commissioner of MLS, actually ran international for a while, and Mark Waller before me. So a lot of good work had been done to lay the groundwork. But it really was. Every market is different, and we had to treat it as such. Each market was different in their level of affinity for the league, their understanding of the sport, what sports were popular in those markets, how business worked, not to mention just, purely time zone from a fan standpoint, how and where and when fans can consume it on various media platforms. And
then the other part, you already sort of discussed it, is that international player pathway, the IPP program of identifying, players that potentially can become NFL players. Jordan Mailata is obviously a shining example of that. But that opening up those experiences and starting to scout around the world, again, that was sort of part of that first remit of that football strategy. What does the next footballer look like?
Yeah, one of the things that we did early on was realize, and continue to do a lot of research on what drives fandom. And you find different stories from different people. But for some people, it's the Super Bowl is the entryway, right? It's this big global event. And as a casual fan, maybe you're just tuning in for the halftime show, but that was people's entryway into it. For some people, it's a little bit like the wall behind you. Is, their father, mother, uncle travels to America, comes back and brings, their nephew or son or daughter a jersey. And all of a sudden that kid now loves Dan Marino and just becomes a Dolphins fan. And then the third is that, like, just the athletes themselves resonate with them, that they somehow just purely as athletes, they fall in love with John Elway and just say like, that guy's really good at what he does. And particularly an athlete who has some sort of connection to them was what we were trying to foster to bridge that gap of like, okay, we can help drive fandom in these markets, or at least just sort of familiarity in these markets if there's more athletes from these countries. Not to mention, and primarily just making the game better, right? Like we just want the best athletes in the world playing this game, regardless of where they're born.
You must be immensely proud looking at the expansion the NFL has had internationally, international games, going to Brazil, opening up new markets.
Yeah.
When you were there, doing PowerPoint slides saying, hey, here's these new markets and what we need to do, and starting to see that expansion happening.
Yeah, it's great. These were just ideas. They absolutely were. They were just PowerPoint slides. And now every year I end up texting, Henry Hudson or Peter O'Reilly, and I tell them how much FOMO I have when I see them playing in Germany or in Brazil, and to see the markets that are on tap, see the ones we're talking about, Spain, Paris, Ireland, see us continue to go back to places like Africa and Ghana, hopefully one day get to Australia, one day Japan, China. All of those things are really exciting.
Well, that's terrific. And again, like I said, that's where we cross paths in helping grow in the Australian-New Zealand market. But you've recently moved into, what we would term club land, going from league to club to the Broncos. What were some of the key differences going from that, league focus to a single club in the Denver Broncos?
Yeah, and it was, not just the NFL as a league, but also the NCAA. So I was there at their headquarters. So I describe it as, 25 years really of headquarters work and then moving to a club. And I think the biggest thing for me is sort of, I use the word intimacy of it. The connection you have to players, the connection you have to fans, and then just sort of how powerful that fandom is. Whether it's sort of on a day-to-day basis, individual fans in the grocery stores, recognize you and wanting to talk about the Broncos. And fortunately now, talking about it in a really positive way, but also just being at the stadiums on game days and starting to recognize fans who come every single game. And to see that, sort of manifest itself in things like our season tickets. We renew, 96, 97, 98% every year. We got a waiting list of over 100,000 people for season tickets. Like that level of passionate fandom, to truly experience it at the club level is different than sort of observing it from afar at headquarters.
And I guess another part of being in Clubland is working with ownership and understanding how that dynamic works. How have you found that relationship at the Broncos?
Yeah, it's been great. The Walton Penner family ownership group is just tremendous. They're a big part of the reason why I came here. Certainly, the great tradition of winning on the field is a draw. The market of Denver itself as a place to live is a draw. The reputation of fandom is a draw. But then when I was going through the process and you're meeting with Greg and Kerry and Rob, and then you sort of layer in and you start talking to Condoleezza Rice and Melody Hobson and Lewis Hamilton, Sir Lewis, you begin to realize pretty quickly that this is an amazing ownership group, and it's lived up to it. Being able to work with them, for them, learn from them, and try to really continue to grow this franchise has been just really special.
And what were some of your key steps when you first got into the role? You sort of talked about, that difference of fandom, as big as the Shield is in the NFL and how powerful it is, like the attachment and the connection fans have with the Broncos, with everything that is Broncos. It's just at a deeper level and a more passionate level. What did you do to better understand, I guess, the Broncos fans and the whole psyche around everything that is the Broncos?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was sort of this dual path of, on the one hand, ownership giving very specific direction on a couple things that they wanted right away. One was they wanted to signal a commitment to the fan base and put $100 million of renovations into the stadium. And so that was day one, was a project that I began leading. And the second was uniforms. It had been nearly 30 years since we release new uniforms. And so that was a project that effectively began very, very shortly after I started. But absent that, they felt like, hey, let's take a step back. Let's listen. Let's observe, both in the building, outside of the building, truly understand this franchise, this organization, this fan base before we go about making a bunch of changes just for the sake of making change because we're new. And to give that amount of space actually was pretty liberating, and not feeling like, okay, I have to hit all of these things right off the bat in order for us to be defined as successful.
So that initial project of looking at upgrades for the stadiums are a big hub for success for teams. What were some of the key things that you wanted to achieve as part of those upgrades, and the fact that you executed them so quickly as well?
Yeah, it was quite the sprint. Like, I'm pretty analytical, at least in the way that I think. And so for me, it was us saying like, okay, what are the opportunities that we have to make game day better? Where do we think the stadium might be falling short relative to our competitors and or fan expectations? And how do we make sure we do something that every fan experiences all of them, but experiences something? So you sort of put that sort of matrix together, and then you start filling it in with different ideas. And so for us to be able to do what we did, like the biggest thing we did that everybody can experience is a new video board. So put in a new video board, 75 feet tall. It's the tallest video board in North America now. That is something everybody can see and they can experience, touch, feel, all of that sort of stuff. And then for that group, we have 125 suites in the stadium that had not been refurbished meaningfully since the stadium opened nearly 30 years ago. And so we refurbished all of those. We expanded the team store by about 25%, making that bigger. A lot of our fans go in there on game days. There's a mad crush into it right before kickoff. And so we wanted to open that up, make the shopping experience a little bit better, upgraded some of our food and beverage stalls, and then created a couple new clubs. The Breckenridge Bourbon Club was a membership club, a place for people to go before games, after games, during halftime, as well as Club 1977. What we have now in a stadium is pretty typical of stadiums that were built in the late 90s, early 2000s, which is, general admission seats on the bottom, club in the middle, sandwiched by some suite levels, and then more GA up top. And what we found is that, like, from a premium standpoint, some people didn't want to sit outside, but they wanted premium, and that's what we had in club. But they also didn't want a 16, 18-person suite. And so we tried to create these spaces for individual people who had the money, or smaller companies who didn't want to fill a giant suite. It's things that you're starting to see in a lot of the modern stadiums. We're trying to address some of those as well.
And was that partly sort of looking at what other teams are doing, but also, like you said, the changing behaviour of fans to go, football is an entertainment product. It is a day out. How can we, provide that? And you think that those, not things like the 1977 club offer that to those fans?
Yeah. So two things we did. One was a lot of travel, ownership. Anytime you play an away game, get to the stadium early, do a tour, talk to those people about what they like and don't like about their stadiums. But then also, whenever we had the chance on a random Tuesday, go fly and go look at another stadium, talk to those people, and really just kind of learn. So we did that pretty quickly early on. And then the second, what we continue to do is survey. We survey. So we do surveys of our fans after every single game. We compile that data. We look at it as a senior staff and ask ourselves, how did we do this week compared to last week? How did we do this week compared to last year? What can we do to correct those things if we're falling short anywhere? How are we doing compared to other teams in the league? So we do that both on game day, but we do it pretty much after any event. Training camp practices, people come out here, we survey. How did it go? What did you like? What did you not like? We did that before we got too far on our uniforms, surveyed our fans to ask them what they were interested in.
I mean, so one of the things is the stadium, but then the other arms race that's in the world of professional sports is training facilities. And so that's now the thing that they're working on to give that high performance facility for both your coaches and teams.
Yeah. So our facility here, I mean, is it's like a home, right? And this home was built in 1990, and and since that time we've knocked down some walls here and done this here and done that and moved things around, and it's in good shape now. I think what you realize is that as you start thinking about the next 25 to 30 years, can you continue to live in this home? And for us, the answer was no. And so, again, tribute to ownership who was willing to spend, a significant amount of money to build a new one. I look outside my window and there's a big hole in the ground. And there's a bunch of, dump trucks and things out there doing work to build a new facility. That's going to be good for football. For us, it's not about being the biggest facility. For us, it was about what's right for us. And for us, it was definitely about player path of travel as a key driver. How many steps are our players taking to get to the weight room, to get to the training room, to get to the cafeteria? How do we make that as tight as possible? Modernize everything around them so they can be as good as they can be. Same for our coaches and scouts. Give them the tools and the space to be successful. But then from a business standpoint, also bring us together. We've got about 70 people who work at our stadium, which is a good 45-minute drive away, who don't need to be at the stadium. They're there because there's no space here. They work in marketing, they work in sales, they work in ticketing. They don't work in stadium operations. And so this new facility, we'll be able to bring those folks down here as well. So the business staff will be more connected to each other, but then also I think they will feel more connected to the football team. Just being around it visually, when you see them out on the field practicing, you see them. I tell people, I think one of the most stark sort of reminders of what our players go through is on a Monday morning. You see them all Monday morning, you're in there getting breakfast, and they come walking in and they're kind of hobbling a little bit. They're a little stiff. They're a little sore. Guys have ice still, and you realize like what they're putting into this game. And so being able to see it just reminds you of what we're focused on. And it's not all just about revenue and sales. It's about being the best on the field.
And I think that's like you said, that connected piece. Like I've spoken to a few different teams that once they have that, the business operations and the training facility connected, one, you feel like you're part of the team. You are riding all the bumps. And whether you're in, ticket sales, membership sales, the digital team, it helps you like both feel what the team's going through, but also tell that story better. Like you'll be able to turn around, stories, more of that storytelling because they'll be close to the facility. I mean, must be excited about that, but also just like that connectedness of the whole business.
Yeah. It's great. A couple of weeks ago, I was on a Zoom. It was just a meeting with somebody, a partner, and our starting right tackle, Garrett Bowles, is a mountain of a man. He comes walking by, sees me through the window, waves. I tried to give him the wave like I'm on a Zoom, and he thought that meant come in, and he comes in. But it was great because my business partner never gets that interaction. All of a sudden, I'm like, Garrett, come on the screen and say hello. So he gets that interaction, and then Garrett gets to see what I do. He understands that there are people here who are working to try and give him and his teammates the resources to be successful. So I think just those sort of informal interactions go a long way to building that culture.
Yeah, I was reading an article, I think it was in the Denver Post, and said that you liked puzzles, big puzzles. But how does that apply? Like now in your role, like your role is a complex puzzle. How do you both help your team solve that puzzle, but also allow your team to solve that puzzle? How have you? How's your leadership style changed or evolved as you try to solve this puzzle that is the Denver Broncos?
Yeah, I think this is one of those, like, this is a puzzle with no solution, right? Like every time you put pieces, together, more pieces show up on the table. So you're sort of this constantly evolving. There is no finish line. You continue to work hard to grow. It's a competitive landscape. So I think that is one sort of metaphorical sort of explanation. I think from a leadership standpoint, again, I talked about ownership. Greg and Carrie, they're engaged, and that really helps. They're engaged, they're present, they care, they ask questions, not like in an accusatory way, but in a way of they want to better understand things so they can help me solve problems. So that part is great. And then I have a great senior staff of people. And so my approach is like, one of which I don't feel the pressure to have the answer to everything. For me, it's more about, am I asking the right questions of them? Am I asking them the right questions? Am I pushing them enough? Am I also setting the vision for what we're trying to get to? Not necessarily how we're going to get there, but at least what we're trying to achieve, so that they, as the content experts, can go out and figure out how to get there.
And yourself, from your own career progression, has there been certain things that you've worked on either personally or skill wise that have helped you, make those steps and make those leaps into, moving into new roles?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. I think one, I am naturally pretty introverted. So for me, it is having to sort of constantly remind myself to do some of the things that don't come naturally, which is like just get out of my seat and walk the halls and go talk to people. Like I'm focused on just doing the work. And so sometimes you just have to get up. So that is like a small thing. I think more broadly is one of just sort of, trying to get better. And so there have been formal programs that I've been a part of where you have mentors or coaches. I have an executive coach now, and I think those are great. Like I think some people look at them a bit negatively, and I think they're great. So I definitely am an advocate for that. And then I remember, going back to me as a young Princeton kid trying to understand the industry and realizing that I got 30 minutes from about 5 alums, and I still am willing to do that. So time permitting, of course, and the season's a little tougher, but giving 30 minutes to people who are doing what I was doing, years ago, just trying to understand the landscape of the business. They're not necessarily asking you for a job. They just want to know, what do you do and why do you do what you do, and help me understand and make sense of this world. So I think that's important to do.
A big part of your focus in that in the NFL role was that looking ahead, and it's sort of part of your role now in that you've got the week to week of game day, you've got these major projects going along, and you're putting the puzzle pieces down, but you're also got to look at that horizon. How do you step back from the day to day and the grind that is the NFL season to one, figure out what the future looks like for the Broncos, and have that conversation with ownership on where do you want to go?
Yeah, so I think I naturally think about the future a lot. And so like on a tactical basis, I just kind of try and make notes of things. I send things to my staff as I think of things, and we'll tell them this is just a bad idea or a crazy idea and throw it out there to them. But it also just kind of gets everybody thinking about the next big thing, the future. And then I think more formally is creating space for that. So, whether that is our business planning process that we do every off season, that gets us not just thinking about next year, but the next few years, I think is important and is a good way just to get people thinking and talking about what, sort of ideas are bouncing around in their head. So we're actually just started that process. It actually starts towards the end of the season. So we just start that process and then we'll wrap it up come March.
And is that something like that piece of there is no bad idea, like making that part of the culture to have someone say, hey, could we do this? Because, again, you remember those PowerPoints when you've written it down and you're like, I don't know how this is going to fly. And then you've seen it 5 or 6 years down the track that it happens. How do you enable your staff to say, hey, let's throw this up. We want to be a club that embraces that kind of change?
Yeah. For me, I try to do it on an individual level first, right? Because sometimes it's just having a one-on-one meeting with someone and they're talking to you about something, and then, there are bad ideas, first of all. But if it is something that I think is a reasonable idea, then it's like, yeah, let's explore that further. And then also let's bring in, somebody from that department and that department. And the three of you guys kind of dig into that further. Everything doesn't have to go from 0 to 60, from, idea to full on staff presentation, but just sort of support people's exploration, which is really what I think we're trying to get to. Is we talk about it as this culture of growth, this culture of innovation, of curiosity, humility, all of those things. Those words are what we try to live by. And I think that's how that plays itself out, is just small individuals, but also small groups of people. going and taking the time to explore things, and then celebrating it when they do. I think is important. We try to do that. It's just, hey, here's something we just did, and it was different, and it was new, and it worked out, and that's great. Or when it doesn't work out, also, that's okay, because it was this small sort of incremental test we just did. And yeah, we tested it, and actually nothing really came out of it. Okay, well, let's just move on to the next one. That's also okay.
Yeah, one of my biggest takeaways of doing improv is yes-anding. So taking someone's idea, yes-anding it, and then having, it's normally that byplay, that backwards and forwards, that the original idea, you're right, might be a terrible idea, but it's that yes-anding and that backwards and forwards and getting other people's opinions in that can make it really happen. Damani, I really appreciate you taking the time. I have been to a game at the Broncos at Mile High, and getting adjusted to the altitude.
How long ago was that?
I think it was 98. Like, it's a long time ago. But you've adjusted to the altitude by now.
Yeah. Certainly have. That didn't take too long, actually. I was down at sea level this past weekend visiting family in Washington State, and was actually like, wow, I worked out and I was like, I actually feel pretty good. So you get that benefit when you go down from the mountains. But no, we the whole family, we love it up here.
Terrific. Well, what I want to do is just get to our Sports Geek closing five. Really do appreciate you coming on the podcast. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
The first memorable sports event I attended was a University of Washington football game. So I grew up in Washington State, college football game. This was the early 90s when they were rolling. I mean, they were winning the Pac-12, the Pac-10 at that time. Really, really good. Don James was the head coach. And just, I remember the environment. Two things I remember. That environment of just like, wow, there's a band and everybody's, happy and they're chanting and singing. And this is great. Sort of that tribal nature of sports. That was the first time that clicked. And then also remembering that, like, I went because my friends' parents had season tickets, and I was just like, wow, their like life is built around this, right? Like, we have season tickets, and this is what we do every Saturday. We drive an hour and we go to watch this football game, and just understanding that culture. But UW Husky football was the start of it for me.
Absolutely. Also, you would have been to a lot of different sports events and tried a lot of different food at sports events. Do you have a favorite food or a favorite food memory at a sports event?
Oh boy, my favorite food sports memory when I was an intern at the NCAA, going to the College World Series in Omaha, Nebraska, with my wife, and wasn't working the event, but fell in love with it. It's probably my second greatest sports event memory, but had a big, Australian, big bloomin' onion. And it was like, I ate the whole thing. Like, it was delicious. It was the greatest I had ever had. I was like, oh, this is glorious. It's a lot of grease. My body can't take that now, but that was a good, I just remember eating that there with my wife, watching it in that environment. I was just like, yeah, like that was when I was just like, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to help bring this experience to life for everybody in the stands and on the field. That's the kind of role that I want to have.
Terrific. Never seen a bloomin' onion convert someone's sports business career, but we'll take it. In your role, obviously you're getting a lot of stuff coming across at all times. What's the first app you open in the morning?
So what I try to do is I kind of stay off a lot of sort of non-work related apps during the day. So I try to power through it right in the morning. And so I have a whole, which is also a way to procrastinate before working out, quite honestly. But I start with New York Times. I get the morning briefing. I read that. Then I go to LinkedIn. What's happening in the business world? What are people doing? I use that as motivation. I sort of hate scroll the LinkedIn, what other people are doing. And then I go to sort of just your typical social media, what's going on in the world on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, sort of all those. And by then I'm usually like, okay, I should probably go exercise. But that's sort of my morning routine.
Not a problem. Is there someone that you follow that you suggest that the podcast listeners should give a follow to, and why?
Other than you, of course, right?
It's not a fishing expedition to get compliments, but I will take them. But yeah, other than me.
Yeah. So I have it's great now that I've moved out of New York, New Jersey, and here in Denver. My commute is only about 20 minutes. And so I love the Sports Business Journal Morning Buzz. And so I do that in the morning. I get in the car, hit that, get a quick, usually it's like 10 to 15 minutes long. What happened in the last 24 hours in the world of sports business. Usually get that right before I walk in the door here at the office.
Terrific. And lastly, I always ask this from a personal point of view and potentially from a team point of view, but what social media platform is your MVP?
Yeah, I'd say probably Instagram. I think it does. It's a good balance of storytelling that it allows, and that is both sort of from a business perspective as well as people's sort of personal lives. I think a good balance of, text, video, photo. I think it's a good balanced platform. So big fan of Instagram. Don't post very often, but I like to consume it.
That's all right. That's it. There is a lot of people that are in the consumption space on social media, and it's completely valid. Damani, I really appreciate you taking the time. If people are to reach out, and I always encourage people who listen to reach out and say thank you. What is the best platform for people to reach out to you?
Oh, LinkedIn for sure. I'll be on it every morning.
Well, thank you very much. All the best for the rest of the season and the years ahead at the Broncos. Really do appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Do you want to increase your fan base globally or locally? Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call to book a call with Sean.
Thanks again to Damani Leech. And again, congrats to the Broncos on securing a return to the NFL playoffs. I know Mile High City would have been buzzing with the Broncos making the playoffs. Onward and upward for Damani for future seasons. Please connect with him on LinkedIn or on XDLeech9. The links to that, to Damani and everything we discussed, and a few links to the Broncos post will be in the show notes. And if you have listened to the episode and you did enjoy it as much as I did, please reach out to Damani and say thank you. You can find the show notes at sportsgeekhq.com/403. As I said at the start, this is my year 12 of podcasting and year 16 of Sports Geek, which amazes me every day that I get to do what I get to do. From a 2025 point of view, the podcast is going to go from strength to strength. I'm really looking forward to the episodes that we've already got ready, that are in the can, that are going to come out soon. We're going to do a lot more effort on YouTube, both with the full interviews and some clips. So I'd really appreciate if you could subscribe to Sports Geek on YouTube. That will really help us. And then from a work point of view, I really want to get back to working with teams, working with digital teams, helping them. One of the things I have been doing for 16 years is optimizing digital teams. And I still think there's a big upside there in helping them from a workflow point of view, understanding the right tools, leveraging things like AI. So it might be a short stint, it might be a couple of sessions, it might be a workshop. I do think I can add a lot of value to your team, whether it be in person or virtually. Please reach out. Sean at sportsgeekhq.com is my email, or you can book in for a time for a call to discuss how we could work. Or we can meet in person. You can do that if we're here in Australia, and I can travel to you, but I also will be traveling. So I will be on the road late January, early February. I'll be in Orlando for the Pro Bowl and New Orleans for Super Bowl 59, working in capturing and covering the games for the NFL AUNZ account, in presenting the NFL to the Australian market. So really looking forward to that. If you will be at the Pro Bowl or New Orleans, please let me know. And then afterwards, I'm going to go to San Francisco and Houston, and I've set up a few meetings and doing some of those things, working, catching up with digital teams, finding what they're doing, what's working on the ground, what's working for game day, what's working in storytelling and those kind of things. I'm just looking to get into interesting rooms and meet interesting people. So if you know an interesting room or an interesting person, or you are an interesting person yourself, please reach out. I'd love to connect. I love connecting with podcast guests and podcast listeners. I've already teed up a few connections and a few meetings and so far, and I expect my slate to get full afterwards. I mean, the first 10 or 15 days I'll be pretty busy on all things NFL. It's a crazy time around Super Bowl week, but post Super Bowl I'll have a little bit of bandwidth, and looking forward to catching up with some people in Houston and San Francisco. So until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Have you checked out the Sports Geek Rapid Rundown? It's our daily sports business podcast powered by AI, available on all podcast platforms. We're here to help our podcast listeners improve. Please get in touch and see how we can collaborate. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. All Sports Geek episodes are just a click away at sportsgeekhq.com.